Good evening. Welcome to The Big Question on NDTV Profit. I'm Vikram Oza. Now, for over a year and a half, the Adani Hindenburg saga has cast this long shadow over India's markets and our regulatory systems. Yes, it started with a 106-page report by a little-known US short seller called Hindenburg that really wiped out more than $100 billion in market value and sent shockwaves through Dalal Street. But now SEBI has spoken. Its final report, after a thorough probe and scrutiny, is out. India's market regulator has dismissed the core allegations of stock manipulation and financial fraud against the Adani Group. Now the report is ruling that there were no related party violations, no siphoning of funds, no manipulation of share prices. Loans were paid back, disclosures were in order, and that's how the so-called smoking gun has fizzled out. Gautam Adani himself says this proves what he has always maintained, that the claims were baseless, an exoneration, which brings us to our big question this evening. Now that Adani is vindicated through the SEBI report, is it time to take on India's economic attackers? And that's what we're discussing tonight. We are going to be joined by political analysts, market experts, but right now we have Supreme Court lawyer Rayan Karanjawala, who's with us. Great to have you with us, Mr. Karanjawala. First, how do you... Yes, great to have you. But tell me, in your opinion, how are you viewing how the Supreme Court has handled this case? They appointed an expert committee. They sought SEBI's findings and then effectively allowed the regulator's word to stand. Did the judiciary strike the right balance in this case, according to you?
The Supreme Court has handled the matter with its usual sagacity. It interfered only as much as it needed to. It appointed an expert committee to see whether there were any prima facie violations, didn't find any, and then let SEBI, which is the regulator and which is the natural adjudicating authority, run its full course. And so it waited. As you know, in January 23, these allegations were made. Most of 23 and 24 and part of 25, SEBI went through all these allegations in detail, as you yourself just pointed out. And they have ultimately come to a simple conclusion that there was no wrongdoing on any of the allegations made against the Adani.
But Mr. Karanjawala, whether it was the Indian judiciary, you spoke about the Supreme Court and how it has acted in this matter. Whether it is the Indian judiciary, whether it's our market regulator, SEBI, whether it's our parliament or corporate India as a whole, everyone had to answer Hindenburg's allegations. Now the question to you is, shouldn't Hindenburg itself be made to answer? What is the way that that matter can be pursued now?
Well, I'm sure there are legal avenues open to the Adanis in case they choose to take it, which is that they can sue abroad and so on and so forth. But then you'll have to prove a very high level of, perhaps malice before you're actually able to take any real action against them. So Gautam Bhai's lawyers will, of course, advise him on what to do. At this juncture, I just want to make a small disclaimer, which I always do when I speak on this issue, which is that the group is a client of mine for the last several years, though, of course, they haven't consulted me in this matter. So I just thought I'd put it out there too.
Certainly, and we appreciate the disclaimer, Mr. Karanjawala, but shouldn't those responsible, I'm pursuing this matter as far as the allegations are concerned and what transpired because of it, the market saw a big crash, the kind of damage that was caused by that report, shouldn't the people who put that report together and put it out face consequences for what seems to have come through in the SEBI report as baseless claims?
Well, I mean, at a sort of a emotional level, maybe you're right. But then in order to face those consequences, certain actions will have to be taken either by SEBI itself or by the Adanis by way of a suit against them for damages. So those are things which are out there. You have to understand one thing, that, when you are as big as Gautam Bhai is in terms of business, then a lot of this actually goes with the territory. I saw it with the Ambanis also right in the beginning when they were coming up. Various applications were filed, various petitions were filed, many battles were hard fought on both sides, and slowly they went through their test of fire. This has been Gautam Bhai's test of fire.
It certainly has, and he has come through as well, and something that he has spoken about. But joining us on this discussion is also Tehseen Poonawalla. He's, of course, a political analyst, and, of course, markets regulator Sunil Subramaniam is with us as well. Tehseen, as far as you're concerned, when you look at this SEBI report, to you, does it prove that the attack on Adani was based more on perception rather than any real proof?
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me on the show. There are 2 or 3 issues that I would like to flag right away. Number one, that the entire Hindenburg report was based upon speculation, incorrect information, only to go short. So when the Hindenburg report came out, and I had, of course, gone through the Adani documents and the filings that the Adani Group had done, I had publicly put out on X, formerly Twitter, that I am going long on the Adani Group. And see what's happened. After making millions of dollars, the Hindenburg Group has disappeared. Now, as the former speaker rightly said, Gautam Adani is too big, the Adani Group is too big to fail. But can we imagine the plight of those millions of small investors, medium investors who lost money only because somebody decided to be predatory, put out false reports, and go short? Now, let me put 2 disclosures out. I am not against short selling in the market. I believe the market it's a mechanism of the market, and there are inherent risks in the market. But can short selling be allowed based on false, incorrect reports, disguised as investigative journalists, so that you make millions of dollars? We now know from the SEBI investigation, all of those things that were put out were false. The shell companies, the insider trading. So can we allow a mechanism that allows for a false report to come out, completely damage a company's reputation? The people who pick that report then make millions of dollars on that report, and then they completely disappear as the Hindenburg Group has disappeared. Can that be allowed? Such predatory tactics, can it be allowed in a market? And who suffers? The common man, the common Indian, the common investor. This is something that we as a nation need to debate. This is something SEBI needs to look in. I again say, I'm not against short selling, but can a fake report be put out by those who want to go short, and then they make millions on that fake report?
Let me take that across to Sunil Subramaniam, someone who watches the markets very closely. Mr. Subramaniam, what's your take on this? As far as Hindenburg is concerned, when you see the work of a short seller, yes, indeed, they are part of the market mechanism, like Tehseen is pointing out. But can they be allowed to put out false information, something that they make money out of? They cause a lot of damage. They erode the kind of credibility that our markets have enjoyed, our regulatory systems have enjoyed, and they get away with it. Can that be allowed to happen?
The thing is that there is no universal worldwide regulator like a World Bank or whatever to make a decision and act against this. Because Adani is not the first company against which Hindenburg did this. They made huge amount of money from another non-Indian company where they did it. That's number one. Number two, Hindenburg did not short in the Indian market. They shorted their bonds outside, the ones listed outside. So technically, they have not interfered with the Indian market. They only dealt with the papers outside. So then it's up to an SEC, a US regulator, to look at whether they falsely, I agree with Mr. Poonawalla here, that short selling is a normal market, healthy liquidity mechanism across the world, right? So, but you're allowed to do that based on views, not based on either insider information or based on false allegations. So definitely this is a case for, at a political level, to us to take up. I know the US-India relationship is going through its up and down, but right now we seem to be on a decent weekend with Mr. Trump calling Mr. Prime Minister on his birthday, wishing him and calling him a great Prime Minister. So maybe things are okay right now to that extent to lean upon them, the SEC. But then Hindenburg doesn't exist any longer because they collapsed under their own mechanisms. So maybe the market itself has punished this perpetrator in its own natural justice way. Like that, you have this katta panchayats, they say in India.
So you're saying that in the natural course of things, now that Hindenburg seems to have closed shop, justice has been served. But on that point, Mr. Karanjawala, I wanted you to come in. Is this really research, the kind that a short seller has put out, or the kind of report and the kind of damage that it has done? Is it economic and political sabotage as well, which is disguised as some sort of activism?
Well, 2 things.
Tehseen, I'll just come to you in a moment. Yeah.
I agree. First of all, I agree with Tehseen when he says that short selling is a part of day-to-day market activity. And frankly, there are ups and downs for short selling. Secondly, as far as putting out a report like this, it is after the findings have been given that we are now saying it is a false report. Right in the beginning, nobody really knows. So it's very difficult to frankly regulate this kind of thing, especially as Mr. Subramaniam pointed out, they didn't short sell in the Indian market. They short sold abroad. So these are things which I frankly feel you either have to live with, or the person concerned, the company concerned, will have to go to an international jurisdiction in order to get retribution. I really don't think there's much you can do. I don't think you can sort of expect countries to start intervening every time. Because today, of course, Adani is a very big group, and a false story against them has a large impact. But there may be smaller groups which, when they have stories put out against them, have an equally large impact,
Right.
at least on those groups.
Right.
So it's very difficult at this moment because of one case to say, no, now this can't be allowed. And frankly, it's very difficult not to allow it.
So yes.
As I said earlier, it goes with the territory. When you're that big, you have to expect these kind of things will come at you, and you have to be prepared to handle them.
Prepared to handle them, but it's the small investors, like Tehseen Poonawalla started out by saying, it's the small investors that suffer the most when things like this happen.
Well, that's part of the market, no?
Right.
That's
Fair
part
enough.
of the market. You when you go into the market, you know that if things like this will happen. And see, frankly, it came as a big shock. But I think if it were to happen again to another big group, I think the market this time would take it much better. If not Hindenburg, some other group came forward. This time, I think people would take it much better.
So
and
you
I
think this experience has taught us, it has helped us mature as a market?
You see, everyone learns from the lessons that they've been taught. One of the things is to be constantly ready with counter information, and you sort of barrage it and have 40 people out there coming out and saying, no, this is fine, this is fine, this is fine.
Right.
And the market itself gains confidence when it sees the voice on the other side. Sometimes what happens is you're not ready with your voice on the other side when something like this suddenly
So when it hits you like a bolt from the blue, then perhaps
then
the damage is that much more severe.
You're not quite prepared. You didn't quite expect it.
Sure.
Now, after this one episode, I'm sure everybody will be sort of internally assessing their situation constantly.
Yes.
All the big companies will be having a look at if there's a run on us, how do we react?
Correct.
What is the data that we have ready in order to bring it out into the market at the earliest?
Right.
So I think that's where it is.
Tehseen Poonawalla has a point to make on that. You believe that this is something that the markets have learned, this kind of experience has taught us?
First of all, I have a lot of respect for both Mr. Subramaniam and Mr. Karanjiwala for the points that they're putting out, but I have a slightly different take. One, please understand that, okay, this may be an attack on the Adani Group as such, but what was this also an attack on? On the Indian regulatory system.
It was?
And I am upset, yes, and I'm actually upset with SEBI. Look, when you talk about money transaction or insider trading, that is as much as it's an attack on Mr. Adani or the Adani Group, it's that much an attack on SEBI. Was SEBI snoozing? So for SEBI to come out and put that information out that this was not the case, or say that those are not shell companies that were put out by Hindenburg, SEBI itself took so much time to put that information out that again, people lost a lot of money, innocent people that believed in the Indian growth story. Why should I not believe as an investor this was not an attack on the Indian growth story? That's the first part to it. The second part to it, say Vikram, you as a journalist put out a story, a fantastic investigative piece, say against another group, an international group. It is unethical for you then to use that information and go short or go long.
Right.
Just as those ethics exist, we as a nation and as global citizens and global investors need to have those ethics in place.
Right.
Can you manufacture a completely lie report, on the basis of that go short, make millions of people lose money and yourself make millions of dollars and disappear? That is the question that I am raising.
That is a fair point. Sunil Subramaniam, in terms of the regulatory structure that we have, all of that came under a cloud until this final report has come out. What do you think we could have done better in terms of the lessons that we can learn from this entire experience? What do you think we have got going for ourselves by way of investors and how they treat reports like the one from Hindenburg?
Maturity needs to improve. the depth of the market needs to improve. I think the liquidity, if you see, we have roughly about 1.36 billion shares, average daily trading volume, it's 9 billion in the US. So we are far less. So any such move tends to have extreme reactions. So that's a function of the fact that we're a developing country. And over a period of time, as the market depth improves, only this will improve the impact of such a one company impact. The second is our mindset issue, which I think Mr. Poonawalla referred to, and Mr. Other panelists also referred to, Mr. Karanjiwala. What it is that, see, I think we still have a colonial mindset, in the sense that because the British ruled us, and whatever the white man says, we tend to place it a much higher pedestal than what our fellow countrymen say. So when this report comes from an American company, so-called in quotes, and lays out the allegations, we rush to believe this. Because I still remember the days just after this report came up. The next day, social media was all about which mutual fund is holding how much of Adani. And as if it was the worst thing in the world to hold Adani, there was a lot of trying to put a run on the mutual funds. So we tend to, we have to change that mindset. And I believe that this fact that this came and has been proved to be completely false and malicious will help us that next time around, we just won't believe that Gora man coming and saying something and doing it. The third thing which I want to point out is that now people will be smarter, in the sense that even in this Adani Kand, there's one person who made a huge deal of money, not Hindenburg. It was GQG Capital Partners, Mr. Jain, who actually went and bought it after the shares corrected. And he's been laughing all the way to the bank now. So that's a lesson also for India, that when such thing, unverified information comes in, right, the smart investors should step in and buy these on the dips. So that will be a natural corrective mechanism. And he saw, again, he's not a Gora, he's a brown man sitting in America, but an FII made money out of this, not the Indian investors.
The colonial perspective is an important one to take up with Manish Singh. He's joining us from London. He's Chief Investment Officer at Crossbridge Capital. Manish, welcome to The Big Question.
Thanks,
you tell us, hi. So when these markets collapse under the weight of such scrutiny, the perpetrators vanish without a trace. How many such instances have you seen in your work life so far? And has there been any accountability on them?
I would say good afternoon. Shorting is not a crime, as we know, and it has been spoken on the panel before. But there are other lessons to be drawn from this. And also, it's by comparison. If you look at the liquidity of the US and European market, it is far higher than what you have seen in the Indian market. But to me, Vikram, the key lesson from this is about communication. And this was my feedback to the Adani Group, the people that traveled here in London, is that you don't start communicating more when you have a crisis. You communicate all the time. Your communications have to be very strong. So when something happens, you kick up in gear and you start communicating and giving and putting out the information that you think investors should know. So that is a big lesson. To your question about how many of these instances, we have seen many of that. You have seen with Herbalife, where Bill Ackman went out with a short report and he lost his shirt over that. Partly he was right, partly wrong, and Herbalife still exists as a business. When you short something, you put your capital at risk. Now, in this case, it was a bit different because it's a research group. They're not backing the call with the cash, and others who are following the call are using their position to short something. So there is a market dynamics. I wouldn't want to comment too much on that.
But Manish, you need to, because when you're talking about what is being put out as facts and they are proven to be untrue, that's when the problems really stand, because these reports are what the markets are reacting to.
Yes. So I would say that, again, I said that you can only counter miscommunication with a better communication, because that's the only way you can bring out the truth. But to the point about, do regulators in India and the government of India have a role to play to look into this? Absolutely. Yes. As I said in my previous interaction with one of your colleagues as well, is that this has a bigger, profound impact in terms of the cost of capital, because yes, you cannot take one incident and use that to erode the trust in a system. Because if you do that, that is going to impact the cost of capital, not just for the private corporates, but also at the sovereign level. And go back to 1990s, when you would always have a currency crisis in the emerging market. How did that happen? That happened because these companies, private companies or government in emerging market, were asked to borrow in dollar And then there used to be a rug pull, basically, because you have all your revenues in local currency, all your debt is in dollar, and any time the dollar line is pulled, you have a big crisis, your currency goes into tailspin, then foreign investors come and buy this asset at cheap price. So that stopped when local governments or governments in emerging markets started accumulating dollar. So the response has to come from within. But also, I think that SEBI has to have a communication line open with SEC and to find out and investigate whether there was any substance to what they said. And at the national level, between the two governments, there has to be coordination between the finance ministry and at such levels to ensure that these things don't happen. And it should be looked into. I am of the strong opinion that the regulator to regulator conversation has to happen, because you cannot let this incident erode any amount of trust.
And that's exactly what has happened. But do you think stronger communication could have stemmed the damage? Do you agree with that, Mr. Karanjawala? Whether it's the regulator, the kind of communication that has gone out, do you think it kind of met the kind of requirements that an incident of this kind, the kind of losses that were registered because of it, could have been stemmed if we had that?
Well, I haven't examined it in detail, but definitely at first blush, that's what it looks. And I said earlier also that one of the things I felt that the group could have done was that suddenly send out a barrage of counter information in order to ensure that the initial shock that the system got was to some extent stemmed. So that's what I do feel. And of course, SEBI could have played a role also. But these are all things that, in hindsight, one is always wiser. While things are unraveling, things are just unraveling.
Indeed. But of course, we learn from our mistakes. And Tehseen Poonawalla, perhaps SEBI as a regulator, you said they were late in the kind of reactions that could have come much earlier, and we could have seen less damage unfold. But also, when you look at the kind of reactions that we got from our political establishment, from the opposition as well, Tehseen, they leaned so heavily on Hindenburg's report instead of waiting for our institutions to conduct and complete the kind of scrutiny that they needed to. We were willing to jump to conclusions, weren't we?
You're getting me started on that, Vikram. But, there was one more brown man who made money when this crisis happened. That was me, not as much as some other people, but I bet on the Adani Group at that time. So I bought on every dip in India. But let me put that disclosure. But look, here's the problem with in our politics. All right, be it the government or be it the opposition. We are too socialist. We like to beat up the entrepreneurs, and we never understand where will all our social welfare money come from if nobody does business. India as a nation is too Babu dependent. I mean, one of the first things I will do when I'm in government, and it's going to be my first order, is cut Babu down by 50%. But also our politicians need to change their mindset. Even our government is too socialist, and even the opposition. And businesses are not bad. In fact, I will go a step further in saying we don't need one Adani in the country. We need to create several hundred Adanis, several hundred Elon Musks in the country. We need to respect our entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs take a massive risk. And if India has to grow at about 8% and eliminate poverty over the next 2 decades, we need to create several hundred Adanis. And that should be our goal.
Will our current systems allow that, Tehseen Poonawalla? Very quickly, because I'm running out of time.
Babus. If you kick the Babus out, because the kind of socialist mindset Babus have, one is Babus, second is politicians must be told by people that ultimately businessmen and entrepreneurs should be treated well, whether it's a small and medium businessman or large industrialists. Stop calling them thieves, stop going after them, stop sending the ED and the income tax after them. Allow for entrepreneurship, create and foster a political environment where businesses can thrive. That is the only way to achieve 8% growth year on year, and compounded, that will end poverty in our nation.
Sunil Subramaniam, you tell me if you agree with what Tehseen Poonawalla is saying. This entire saga happening at a time that India is positioning itself as a safe haven for global capital. The timing definitely of the Hindenburg report was extremely damaging. But what do you think we need to do as course correction?
See, these are necessary growth pangs of a developing economy becoming a developed economy. Our capital markets have a long way to go in terms of the depth. And I think only these kind of crises will help us develop a stronger capital market. If you don't experience these crises, you think everything is hunky-dory, that being a developed market is great. No, developed market comes with its own challenges. And unless you learn these challenges, and I think this has been a fantastic learning curve for India, for the capital markets, for the regulator in this whole system. So I think that in a way, right? I would say I'm glad this happened because it shows us the risks of opening up the capital markets, at the same time also about communication. So I think we are much better off for this having happened. It's sad that 8 lakh crores of customer wealth got eroded. But that's the price a growth developing economy capital market has to pay, because you learn only by experience. You can't be taught this in the textbooks.
Manish
and
Singh.
Regulator can't respond because he has to do his due diligence. It's taken him 2 years to do it.
Correct.
So you can't think they should have done it earlier, because then they're clearly simply politically responding, right?
Right.
Now you respond after doing the homework. I think that's the right way to do it.
Correct. So we are doing our homework. We need to perhaps do it faster. Communication needs to be clearer. Manish Singh, the way this case has been handled, from the Supreme Court directing SEBI to launch the investigation, will the process followed reassure global investors about India's legal and regulatory architecture and bring back the kind of credibility that our markets should be putting out there?
Well, I hope so, because it's a necessity. Because you want if there's any lost interest, that needs to be restored, and the process has to be followed. So I think it's vital and it should be pursued. And I would second what Mr. Poonawalla is saying, that I am of a very strong opinion that businesses are at receiving end of policy. You have to have business representation in policy and government. And let me tell you 2 ways by which it can change. You should have more ministers who are coming from the business side, I business experience. You should have people sitting on the rate setting committee. And we have this problem now at the Fed and in Bank of England, that most of these people sitting are academic, who have never worked in public life or business life. And they are setting policies and interest rate, which is going to impact businesses.
Yes.
My suggestion to Indian government will be that when they form MPC, they should have half the people with business experience and half the people with academic experience, or babudam as Tehseen likes to call.
Yes.
I mean, you can have some representation of the government, but you have to bring in people because they are at the receiving end of policy. How can you have academics who've spent 30, 35 years of your life in a tenured, secure career,
right,
make such big decisions which impacts businesses? By the same token, why do we have only ministers who come from political parties, career politicians? Let's get in more people from government side, business experience. And this is what you see in the US, who see that as a job to do and not a lifelong career. And they get stuck and become a furniture as part of the whole establishment. I don't think that should happen. And those things need to change as well.
That point is well taken. But at the heart of this debate on the big question tonight is that bigger issue, not just the fate of one corporate group, but the integrity of Indian markets themselves, our regulatory systems as well. The SEBI report has proven that allegations without proof can indeed rattle investors, they can wipe out wealth, and they can dent India's reputation globally. But the real question now is whether India should actively go further, go after them, hold to account those who mount attacks on the Indian economy from the shadows without the facts really to back them and the kind of claims that they make. But on that note, my thanks to all our guests for their insights. Tehseen Poonawalla, Sunil Subramaniam, Manish Singh, Rayan Karanjawala. Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you, our viewers. Thanks for joining us tonight. We'll continue to track this story and its implications. I'm Vikram Oza, and that was The Big Question. Good evening.